Okay, these are the top. I'm not sure yet how many reasons why Boston is going to go bust. There I am in Harvard. I forget what this is called, but normally in the middle of September, this would be flowing with students and tourists and all kinds of people, and it's empty. So number one reason is that New England or Boston, they feel invincible. The area skated through the 2008 Great Financial Depression for various reasons. For whatever, it doesn't make a difference what reasons, it skated through. So this area has seen essentially 20 years of growth. So just cannot possibly imagine a day where people don't want to move here and real estate values increase. So whether you're a Bostonian, a Canterbridgian, or Newtonian, any of these wealthy parts of and up-and-coming parts of Boston, you just see prices increasing. So again, number one is a sense of invincibility. Number two, while I'm at Harvard, domestic college enrollments have been going down in the US for, I think, probably 5 to 8 years now, maybe 5% a year. However, many Asian students and international students, about 1 million of them, come to this country because they want to study here. And they generally are wealthy, right, and pay full freight and buy expensive cars and live in expensive apartments or buy condos. So that's sort of papered over what's really been going on for the past few years, which has been a decline. But now we're at war with China, which gets worse and worse every day. And actually the US is pissed off at everybody. And you have the pandemic. All these things are putting pressure on, huge amounts of pressure on the universities, but they don't want to admit that they're weak, because if they do, then students won't go there. So all this stuff is being buried, just how weak they are. Not someplace like Harvard, of course. I mean, Harvard's going to survive no matter what. I see lots of construction in Harvard because they're like, well, nobody's here, we might as well do it. You have $42 billion, you can do that, but that doesn't mean you're not going to lay off staff in the future. That's a whole other story. Point number three is one of the strengths of this area is biotech and just tech in general. However, biotech is really a creature of a very bubbly stock market, because essentially at the end of the day they sell designer drugs to wealthy people or insurance companies, and probably with Obamacare that helped a bit, but that's over. Obamacare is being dismantled. I don't think the wealthy have enough money to keep buying these designer jobs. And the biggest thing of all is, look at it. I mean, so how ironic that Biogen, one of these biotechs, brought the virus to Boston. They're the ones that basically are largely responsible for getting this place really infected. And number two, for all their supposed genius and power, they haven't fixed the virus very quickly, right? I mean, this vaccine is taking a long time. You think they'd be able to do it 2 minutes for what they're valued on Wall Street. So if Wall Street crumbles, biotech will go with it. And so many of the high-paying jobs that, again, have been boosting property values here in Boston. Number four is the state is in deep debt. The government is hiding the extent of the shortfall in tax revenues. The public, again, because of number one, just can't believe anything bad could happen, doesn't care, doesn't look at it. So in a few months or half a year, when Massachusetts really actually has to make up these tax revenue shortfalls, these budget shortfalls, I just don't see how many jobs aren't cut in the government, many of their service providers, how taxes don't go up, all of it. Massachusetts is one of the most indebted states in the nation. And again, because of number one, people just believe it doesn't matter anymore. Well, it is going to matter, because unlike the federal government, Massachusetts can't print its own money. And even if it could, because of inflation, I don't see that that's going to fix anything for the nation anyway, let alone Massachusetts. Number five, of course, is that a climate like this where it gets cold is probably bad for the virus. We'll have to see in the next few months. But I think you're safer in a warmer climate. Not that you can't get it there, but generally when you get it there, it's too hot and you go inside. I think that's easier to mitigate than here. I don't know whether this is really a big concern. We'll just have to see, but it is possible. Number six, and this is a weird one because this is the plus and the minus of this area. All the houses here, as you are very different. It's a beautiful city with a lot of old and varied housing and roads and everything. And that's a big attraction, and which is why I believe long-term Boston is going to do great. But in the short term, a lot of the power wires are on telephone poles and telephone wires. The streets are messy. There's a lot of infrastructure that's very expensive and needs to be upgraded. And it's a pain to live in a city like this because of all this variation. This is probably a neutral thing, but I think as the states have to come up with money, it's going to be harder and harder to keep this up. And I guess I should include the MBTA in here too. The highways are horrible, some of the worst traffic. The MBTA, they're not putting enough money. So the whole infrastructure thing, to me, the thing that makes Boston nice is also the thing that hurts it, because there is so much spaghetti that needs to be dealt with. Unemployment. We have some of the highest unemployment in the nation. And right now, everybody's like, you know, hiding in their homes or wherever, and you don't really notice it. The state went from having 1.7 billion in its unemployment fund to ending the year with 3 billion in the negative, owing the US Treasury. And that'll expand, even by the state's conservative estimates, to 6 billion by next year. So how is Boston going to do well when we're looking at 1 million people, up to a third of its workforce, not having work next year? Who's going to support them? We can't just let them go homeless. They need to be fed. But who's going to get them jobs? It all goes back to number one. The expectation on people in Boston, like the things that will help them, somebody else will do, or it'll just magically happen. Like somehow the jobs will just magically appear to make Boston great. Well, you know, maybe they will, and again they have in the past 20 years, but I don't see any indication right at the moment. The fact is, highest unemployment in the nation. So how will that work itself out? Another problem is that people come to school here, they live here, they visit, there's tourism here because there are tons of restaurants. But Massachusetts isn't doing anything to save them by reducing the taxes or whatever, so they're going out of business left and right. By next year, at this rate, half of them will be out of business. So even if we get a vaccine, who's to say that, that there'll be enough restaurants to pull people here? This is not a long-term solution. I never see these. You're basically eating in the gutter with rats. I hate to say it. I mean, sure, it's maybe temporary, okay, but I can't see any restaurants making a living serving people out in the gutter. This is just not a long-term viable pull into the area. Again, hopefully the virus clears quickly, and some restaurants have done a nice job. For whatever reason, they have a nice, you know, street to work with. But for the most part, my observations, and I go around town looking at all these restaurants, is it's unviable, and ultimately it will be deemed a complete and utter failure.